evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 23 of the Stone Age Gamer Podcast. My name is Chris, and I'm your host for the evening, and with me tonight is Dan.
Good evening.
And Tiff.
Hey.
And the ghost of Dean.
Aww.
Well, it is Halloween, so I suppose
that's appropriate.
That's a valid point. Yeah, Dean is not with us right now. He's battling aliens or arm wrestling a jaguar.
I don't know.
It's true. It could be dead in a ditch somewhere. We'll all find out. But in the meantime, we're going to have the aforementioned podcast about talking about video game monsters and some of our favorites, some of our favorite experiences with them, and perhaps even a debate about what constitutes a video game monster, because we've been having that conversation on the side, and I think it's pretty darned interesting. So, as we get started, I want to kick things off, because I rarely ever kick things off, and I want to bring up one of the most disgusting and horrible-looking monsters I've ever experienced in a video game, and that is Granfaloon from Castlevania Symphony of the Night. For anybody who doesn't know what this thing is, you enter this room, and there's a giant ball of naked human bodies just all crammed together in a big ball. Mm-hmm. And you hit it with your various weapons, and then bits of it fall off, like bodies just start falling off, and you hear screams of these, just people falling from this thing, and there's some sort of creature on the inside with giant tentacles that's holding the whole mass together. But that thing grossed me out.
It's very gross.
Well, and like the creepiest thing about this monster, and it is, by the very textbook definition, it is a goddamn monster. As you knock these bodies off of this thing, they attack you. So by virtue of trying to defeat the boss in Symphony of the Night, you are creating more enemies for you to fight.
Yeah, and it's like the way that they're attacking you after you knock them off, it's almost like they're willingly part of this thing, which makes it somehow even more disturbing.
I will say that I find this monster to be shocking. Not necessarily by today's standards, I suppose. We've all seen things we do live in a world post-Human Centipede. But at the time...
That's the best movie ever made.
Ew. Shut your filthy mouth.
Top 5.
Anyway, at the time, I find it shocking, because yes, there are monsters throughout Castlevania and various bits and bobs and whatnot, but then to walk into a writhing ball of bodies...
Of people?
It's really disturbing. Like, it's kind of shocking that's where they went with it.
Yeah, I mean, Castlevania, as far as... I don't ever remember Castlevania ever truly grossing me out,
Yeah, it's
it started off
some
with
bats. A skeleton. A writhing ball of person.
It was very much at its inception a send-off to the Universal monsters, Original Castlevania's Dracula and Frankenstein's monster, and even other stuff like Medusa thrown in there. But it's like all these classic monsters, and then the series progressed and it got more realistic, and they had some cool, creepy monsters, but it never truly grossed me out. It was never like... I mean, I went into that room, and even within Symphony of the Night, never having experienced something like that, just going through the game, and some things are creepy, and some things are, really interesting designs. Like, there's that weird plant monster thing that you run into in the marble gallery, and it's got, like, a human woman for a tail, and it turns you to stone or something like that. I don't know. The thing was weird as hell. And, that was, like, off-putting. But this thing was grotesque. This thing was a straight-up abomination. And
yeah, they really turned it up to 11 in that room.
And it was an amazing experience. I was glad it was there, and also disturbed that it was there.
Also made me question my own sanity that you were glad that it was there.
Well, I love the unexpected.
Well, and that game really, I mean, you're right, that Symphony of the Night really was one of the first games where you're like, just, holy shit, what is that? I mean, that is...
Are they allowed to do this?
Can they, like, really? That's...
And not only that, but
there's a naked chick on the back of that plant. What is that about?
There's a naked chick in the loading screen hallways, like the naked statue or whatever. But Symphony of the Night was also... Symphony was such a a strange creature when it came out, because it was during that PlayStation 1 N64 era where everything was polygonal, everything was 3D, and Konami had the stones to go ahead and say, no, we're going to go ahead and make the most beautiful 2D thing that we can. And that was where I wanted gaming to go after the 16-bit generation. That's the kind of visuals that I expected from the next generation, was just this stunning animation. I mean, I remember seeing Symphony of the Night, and I also remember going into arcades and seeing Street Fighter 3 and being like, that's the future of gaming. That stuff's gorgeous. And then seeing Virtua Fighter and thinking, ooh.
Ugh, why would you do that? Why does he have a triangle attached to a trapezoid?
Battle Arena
is terrible.
Have you seen Battle Arena Toshinden in the last couple of years? That game is
wretched.
So ugly. Wretched is the proper word for it.
It really is wretched. And like that, when you look back at those games, especially the PlayStation 1, early Saturn and N64 games that are not Symphony of the Night, like, they don't hold up. You look at them now and you're like, I can't even play this game now. It is visually disturbing to look at.
Yeah, it's just they're painful to look at. All right, let's move on to something else. Let's move on to I'm gonna say Dan. Give us a monster.
All right. Well, looking at these monsters, one of my very favorite games when I was a kid was Splatterhouse. And in Splatterhouse, your main character is his name's Rick, and you're going to rescue your girlfriend, and you put on a terror mask that really is, I mean, if we're just being honest, they made him an analog to Jason Voorhees. He's got a white hockey mask on. It was red in Japan, but it's white here. And he walks around and he picks up a 2x4 and he hits these really creepy monsters throughout the game and whatever. And you go through this mansion and you save your girlfriend and all that good stuff. But there's one particular boss monster that sticks out in this game. And you're walking through the woods and you cross a bridge. It's in the 3rd level of the game. And you cross this bridge. And from the right-hand side of the screen, because this is a 2D beat-em-up, it's just a side-scroller, from the right-hand side of the screen, out walks this mutated, humanoid-looking monster that has a burlap sack over its face, a burlap sack over its torso and genitalia, and then has, instead of hands, chainsaws, which we all lovingly call this guy Chainsaw Hands. His actual name is really, really terrible. His actual name is Biggie Man, which is not very scary at all. But
it certainly must be difficult to put pants on.
I would imagine. Well, that's why he's got the sack on, right? Because, I imagine you could kind of pinch a burlap sack in between your chainsaw blades.
Now, can he turn his chainsaws off?
And if so, how?
And if so, how? Does he do it with his teeth? Does he have to refill with gas?
I think they're blood-fueled chainsaws.
Blood-fueled chainsaws.
Oh, of course.
So, does that mean that his blood is flammable? Because then I would think he'd be relatively easy to defeat.
Well, yeah, you shoot him in the face with a shotgun a few times and he goes down.
Blow up.
Yeah.
But that goes for just about anyone.
That's true.
It really does.
That's true. That's a
There's
pretty
very
universal.
few things who go, that didn't bother me. Next.
Yeah.
What else you got?
You got a point.
You better come with something bigger next time.
Like, I don't think I would want to fight Mr. Biggie. Or Mr. Man?
Biggie Man. Chainsaw
Man.
Hands.
I don't
Biggie
think I'd
Man.
want to fight him. I think I'd have a lot of questions. About his life, about how he got this way, if he enjoys his life. Did he do this on purpose?
I don't know.
Is this like the newest phase in body modification?
It might be.
Was he in really good shape? Like, was he, like, kind of ripped?
He was jacked and then,
buff.
like, mutated. So he's all like red and splotchy
Bane
and huge.
with chainsaw hands?
So do you think he's doing push-ups with chainsaw hands?
I hope so.
Well, here's hoping
really?
he doesn't have hardwood floors. That would be terrible.
If he does, he doesn't anymore.
No, he's got hardwood splinters. Don't even laugh. No, don't laugh. That was a terrible joke. Don't even fucking laugh at that one. That was awful. But no, so, like, I mean, imagine this. Playing this game for the first time, I'm 9. I think this game came out in, like, 1988 or 1989. So I'm, like, 9 or 10 years old. And I'm just walking around. And I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, there's a boss, like, a couple levels before that is just like there's worms kind of all over the background, and they jump out at you, and like it's a really easy boss, and you like punch the worms, but they're not even worms. They're like leeches. They have big gnarly teeth like the rabbit from Holy Grail, and like they jump at you and they bite at you, and like it was a really dick move on the part of this game, because like you fight the whole boss and you get the ending music and the screen kind of flashes, and then as you're standing there, one last little leech jumps out at you, and like that killed me the first couple of times. God, son of a bitch, where did that come from?
Well, you just
but
can't
I got the
trust
music.
leeches.
I got the music and the thing, and it told me it was done, and then it killed me.
They're
so
a very
like
sneaky creature.
You know, you're playing. They are very sneaky. So you're playing through this game, and it's like, oh, this is kind of cool, and like there's some gross stuff, and there's like these weird bodies hanging on chains, and they're vomiting stuff, and there's this worm monster, and there's a very Evil Dead boss where you go into this room and like books are flying at you, and tables and lamps and shit, and then you get to Chainsaw Hands, and it's like, what is that? That is insane. That is a goddamn monster. I'm going to shoot it in the face a few times.
And also, I have a lot of questions.
I'm
going to shoot it in the knees, then I'm going to talk to it for a while.
Well, and like really,
do you need
I
some
think
help, man? Like, can I take you somewhere? This is like Edward Scissorhands.
Is there somebody you want me to call? Because you can't operate a phone.
No, you
very
definitely
true.
can't. And like, if you look at a picture of this guy, he's got like around the burlap sack, like on his waist, there is like a rope belt. so somebody dressed this guy. Like somebody dressed him and said, "Go off into the world, son, and be whatever the fuck it is you're gonna be."
With your chainsaw hands.
With your chainsaw hands and your burlap sack face. Like, it's just...
Now I'm
it's
thinking
so
about,
weird.
how does he go to the bathroom and how does he wipe? I mean...
Seriously, this is a tragic figure.
This is
here we
awful.
are calling him a monster.
No, he is a
I
monster.
mean, who is the monster here, sir, I ask you?
It's just... Well, and like, so...
This is worse than Human Centipede. This is a worse situation.
Really?
This poor
This
guy.
is so terrible.
Well, and what's really awesome is that in the 1988 game, the original Splatterhouse, right? You shoot him a bunch of times, he's dead, you move on to the next stage. They remade Splatterhouse in 2010 for PS3, Xbox 360.
Much to the chagrin of everyone.
Well, it's a very polarizing game. But in this game, you fight Biggie Man again, and one of the things that you do is you rip off one of his chainsaw arms and use it against him.
Aww.
The thing that defines Biggie Man
Surely-
as a monster is used against him.
Surely he has developed some sort of a chainsaw callus at this point.
You would think so. It is Shakespearean levels of tragedy.
Jesus.
That's not cool. That's just not cool.
Tiff, save us from this conversation.
Okay.
What have you got?
I have a good one. I'm going to take you back to a time when we were all young and visiting the arcade. And you see a cabinet that is huge, and it's one of the cabinets that you get in and sit in, which is always the best kind. So after waiting for the little snotty Bobby Budnick to get out of the machine, you finally get in it and pop your quarters in and realize that this is asteroids like you've never dreamed of asteroids before. You still have your tiny little triangle spaceship, but you're doing all kinds of crazy stuff now. There's all kinds of crazy ships flying in, there's planets that you're shooting, and you're collecting crystals and all kinds of stuff, and then out of nowhere, you hear... I live. And you're like, I'm sorry, what?
Beware, I
What?
live.
Yeah. And you're like, asteroids doesn't have a... That's not a... No, we're just shooting these thingies. And after a couple of more, dare I say, sinister voiceovers, out pops Sinistar, who is a floating, glowy-eyed, skull-faced nightmare, all coming at you. And I felt so betrayed by my arcade because I loved asteroids and I really thought they were just trying to give me a new technologically advanced asteroids, and perhaps I didn't look at the cabinet well enough, but I really was not expecting a giant glowy-eyed skeleton face man to just be coming all at me, and it was horrifying.
And talking shit
And
to you
talking,
before he
and
did.
Yeah, he was a
Really?
trash talker.
He was.
But before...
He calls you a coward and tells you to run, and then he eats your face. Sort of, in a triangle-y type of way. But still, for the arcade at that time, there was face eating involved.
Yeah, I remember the first time I played this game being like, all right, Sinistar, so it's this thing and it's going to come get me, and oh, cool, this is kind of like Asteroids. And then this death machine shows up out of
Really?
nowhere.
And it's like, roar!
And then you're
Oh
just
my
like,
God!
it growls at you, you're like, what the fuck? And then it kills you because it's
right,
just
and
like,
the whole time you're
that's
waiting
it.
for it to shoot at you, right? Because everything else has been shooting at you,
It's
but no,
shooting
it
at you,
just
no.
eats you. Because that's what spaceships with skulls on them do. They just eat you. They just eat your tiny little triangle, and your little tiny triangle family doesn't know what happened to your little triangle self. It's terrible. It's a tragedy.
I love this game too. This is just such, it's such classic, we're all on cocaine, so what are we going to come up with next arcade stuff, because it's such an absurd premise. I love that it's just this trash-talking floating star that speaks English, because why wouldn't it?
And you gotta love a title with a pun in it. I mean, it's quality gaming there when you got a title with a pun in it.
That's the truth. Sinistar. What are some of the insults that thing would float at you? You know what? This is the proto Shao Kahn. Really, Shao Kahn was just a ripoff of Sinistar. Now that I think of it,
It really was.
Yeah, it was mostly just really like schoolyard, like run, coward, and I don't know, something about crying or something. I don't know. It was terrible.
go cry in your car.
Yeah, it was really upsetting. Like I'm not great at video games to begin with. I'm going to lose here. You don't need to make fun of me while I'm doing it. That's not cool.
I'm kind of sad that "Go Cry in Your Car" is not an actual Sinistar insult. That would have been awesome.
Perhaps we could get a mod.
And that's this week's Kickstarter. We want to fund a new version of Sinistar.
Your mother never loved you.
Oh, Jesus. All right.
No, that's a brilliant idea. I've already donated to it.
You've already set up the page.
Yep, it's
set
already
your
there.
first donation. We've got 300 followers on Facebook already. It's
Done.
And if you donate a certain amount, our first tier perk is Dan will just call you up and insult you for free.
Yeah, I'll call you a shit dick or something.
I think that should really just be a service on our website. Just a regular service. Have Dan call somebody you know and call him a shit dick.
Yeah, I'm in. I love this idea. I'm happy to be a part of it.
That would be so confusing.
This is fantastic. All right, let's see. Let's wrap back around to me now. I was going to go somewhere else, but I'm going to save that till after the break. I just want to do a real quick mention because it was something, I don't even remember what you all said earlier that reminded me of it, but I was just reminded of one of the coolest monster designs I've ever seen in a game. And this is not a good game by any stretch of the imagination, but it does feature really bad voice acting, and I'm talking about Altered Beast. And I'm talking about the first boss in Altered Beast. Now, granted, all of the monsters in Altered Beast are so cool. They're just this really warped, bizarre monster designs. But my favorite is that first boss, who's just this towering glob of horns and flesh and this hideous fat face. And then he just peels off his face by the truckload and just throws decapitated faces at you over and over again. And it's not even all that threatening because by that point you're the wolf monster and you can just kind of like zap your way through all of it.
You
but
know what,
man,
though?
I remember
There's nothing worse than getting hit in the face with face, though. I mean, that's just terrible. That's a bad day.
It is, and you never see it like regenerating the face. You never see what's behind the face. It's just he pulls up his arm and then a face flies out. He just starts throwing more faces at you, and it was just ugh.
The worst part of this thing is that even though the monster himself is sort of ridiculous looking, the faces are like oddly realistic. I don't it's weird because like most of his lower half of his body is all bones and I don't know, previous victims or something, but his face actually looks like a face. And
Yeah,
then it's flying at you with his mouth all open like are you going to bite me? Because I don't even know. Like I don't even know what's happening on this guy's. It's weird, and it's terrifying.
Yeah, it's a. Ugh. I don't even know what that thing's name is. I hope it doesn't have a name. I do enjoy killing it, and I do enjoy. Yes, Steven. Steven the face thrower.
Wise from your grave. Oh, God damn it! I love Altered Beast.
I do too. It is not a
lie.
good game.
No, it's
but
awful,
it's like.
but goddamn is it great.
Did you ever play the Game Boy Advance sequel they made?
No, I did not.
It's really good. It doesn't look very good. They went with this strange pre-rendered art style, but they actually took the essential gameplay of Altered Beast, which isn't spectacular to begin with.
No,
but they
it
took
says
that,
it all right there in the title.
Yeah, you are a dude that turns into a thing, and that's the whole crux of the biscuit right there. That's all we have.
That,
But they took that basic
that was
gameplay.
a late night meeting. That was.
Yeah, it was. What are we gonna do? Well, we've got Space Harrier. That's really good. We need something else. We need it by Tuesday. Cool. I'm gonna fart out this game.
A dude that turns into a thing. Going home.
Yeah.
Next, Afterburner. All right.
Oh god, Afterburner was great. But yeah, the sequel to Altered Beast, something of the realm. I don't know, but it was a sequel to Altered Beast. Came out for Game Boy Advance, and if you like Altered Beast, it's Guardian of the Realms. That's what it's called. It's actually a pretty decent game. They somehow made the basic gameplay of Altered Beast palatable and quite decent.
That's
And it'll probably
surprising.
never show up anywhere ever again because it was published by THQ and they don't exist anymore.
No,
I want that
no,
on the
they
cover
do
of the
not.
box, though. You got to call up your Uncle Tusk and get a new box printed up. It's somewhat palatable. Altered Beast
I would
2, somewhat
a big
palatable.
big starburst on the front. Somewhat palatable.
Stone Age Gamer says somewhat palatable.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, that's no, God damn it, I love Altered Beast. I love everything about it, and had no interest in, like, I know there was a Game Boy Advance one, but I went, no, I don't want to taint my love of this game. And wasn't there like a 3D remake too?
It was scheduled and never came out. I mean, it might have come out overseas, but I don't think that it did. I think it got as far as being in like beta stage, and then they were like, nah, nope, we're not doing this.
We
Yeah,
just
no-
remembered this sucks.
This
'Cause-
was a shitty idea, guys. Let's just stop.
It must have been bad if Sega looked at it and said, yeah, this doesn't meet our high standards of quality.
This is not quite up to snuff, boys.
Ugh.
Back to the drawing board. I would like to, before we take a break, just throw out a game that I have never played, but have seen enough screenshots of and know that the final boss is indeed quite a monster. And I know, Chris, that you can speak to this much more than either Tiff or I can. But Gygus from Earthbound
Oh, yeah.
is like some faces and some red stuff that takes the shape of a number of like in utero fetuses.
Oh, God.
And I'm not okay with any of it.
I'm not okay that you even said that.
It's a very strange looking final boss, and it looks like a damn monster.
You're not wrong. That is a strange looking final boss. I've only seen pictures of him because I have not beaten Earthbound yet.
Okay.
It is
You're
very much on
fired.
my list of things to do. I think I'm most of the way through the game. And bringing up Earthbound is cool because Earthbound has some weird ass monster designs. Not really the scariest monster designs you've ever seen, but it's there's really strange creatures in Earthbound, which I guess is part of what makes the game so damn charming. That really sums up a lot of Earthbound. It's like this really charming thing, and it's really almost cute and very interesting, and then it just will hit you with this very strange darkness out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and then it'll go away.
Yeah, that's
There's
pretty
this
damn dark.
yeah, there's this
pretty
really
dark.
kind of odd undertone to a lot of Earthbound, and I think it's part of what gave it its huge cult following is that it's got this really, really, really bizarre quality to it. That's while it is always charming and always interesting, it's not always completely friendly, and that's there you go. That's one of the coolest things about Earthbound. And I think that's why it has the following that it has. You should play this game sometime. Do you like turn-based RPGs?
I love turn-based RPGs.
Oh, who doesn't?
Yeah, you should
Never
play this
really.
game sometime. I
What
mean,
makes the world go round.
you guys
I
are
am a
planning
90s
on
kid.
you're planning on
Like-
getting a Wii U at some point, and it's like $8 on the Wii U shop channel. And this game is well worth your $8. And it's such an interesting old school style RPG. It's not flawless by a long shot, but it does a lot of things that modern RPGs should do, and it's so interesting. And if you like old school RPGs, that should be one of the first things you do if and when you eventually get a Wii U.
Okay, well, since both of you talked about two, I'll throw in one more. I don't know that this technically qualifies because he is somewhat humanoid, but Goro.
Yeah, Goro's totally
his,
a monster.
His ridiculous stringed second pair of arms before, so we'll throw him in there again. It is, I will give you, it is much harder to see the strings in the video game than it is in the movie.
Well, in the video game, he was straight claymation.
There's still strings. They're there. But he's pretty awesome. I don't know that I would ever call him horrifying or anything, but I would say he's one of the more interesting things to look at in that game, and he's pretty cool. I dig him.
Yeah, it was one of those things that I never really got a good look at him in the arcade at first. You know, because he would just come out of nowhere and he
beat you so damn quick.
He just completely destroyed you. But the more you look at him, like, I didn't really realize until you read about him that he's kind of supposed to be part dragon in some way, and you see
he's
all
got, like, scales.
Yeah, the creepy scales and nastiness on his back. And
you know what he always reminded me of was those well, I called them trash can men, but I think before they were trash can men, they were muscle men.
Yeah, muscle men.
The little, like, pink, fleshy colored, like there'd be like a super buff guy with a teacup for a head and like block man and that kind of stuff. Like, cause he was kind of that same like ambiguous chewed bubblegum pink color, and I don't know. He always reminded me of those.
Yeah, he definitely counts for me as a monster because you're playing through this game and you're like, all right, I'm ripping heads off of ninjas and Jean-Claude Van Damme archetypes and this girl that's in this game for some reason, because we have to have a girl.
A monster.
And then what is that? Why does it have 4 arms? I'm dead. Holy shit.
And not only that, but when you first get to the fight before you fight Goro, and you're in Goro's lair, and he's making all this noise in the background, and there's all those eyes in the background, and I'm like, oh god. And then he just jumps down from the ceiling, and I'm like, oh god. And when he picks you up with his bottom arms and beats you with the top arms, the arcade was so loud. It
all
was
that bass that would hit.
Boom, 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 just hitting you. And the whole arcade's shaking. You're just like, oh my god, I can't do anything.
This is the best, worst thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah, you really could. Like, watching somebody in the arcade beat Goro was like just this mind-blowing experience. Because, like, you know, you're sitting there and you're like, I'm going to put my quarter up because I've got next, whatever, I'll take this guy out. And then, like, bang, fuck, I'm dead. Like, that was the end of it. And then watching somebody beat this monster of this half-dragon, half-human, 4-armed, evil creature.
Of a
like,
give him extra arms?
I don't know. Okay. Those were supposed to be his wings, but they're arms.
So
good one, Dan.
Thanks. No, that totally works.
Okay.
But after somebody beat him, seeing somebody beat him in the arcade, and this is kind of how the experience went for me, is that, you know, it was like a long line of folks just eventually working down, and then somebody beat Goro, then it was time to face Shang Tsung, and then they just beat Shang Tsung.
Yeah.
And the biggest anticlimax of all of it was that when Shang Tsung gets knocked down, and you see his feet, and he's just wearing a pair of white Reeboks. I'm like, what the hell? Because he's like, oh, this is the guy that's past Goro. He's going to be mad intimidating. And he's floating, and he shoots those, like, screaming skull fireballs. And that was kind of intimidating, but he kept turning into the characters you've already beaten in the game. Yeah. And then you beat them, and then he falls down, and you see his sneakers. I'm like, wow, all the seams are really starting to show in this game.
Well, Shang Tsung is thousands of years old. He probably, at that age, I would imagine, has osteoporosis.
Fallen arches, at least. I mean, he needs
if not
support.
Osteoporosis.
Yeah, but if you could float, what are you wearing sneakers for? Like, why even bother touching the ground?
That's a very fair point.
He's just trying to show you that he's, like, hip and with it.
He's with all the cool kids in Outworld.
Yeah.
I've got my Air Force Ones on. Me and Jay-Z are tight.
On the same lines, I suppose, as Goro, a personal favorite of mine, and I suppose he's a bad guy when you're fighting against him, but I always love to play with him. Blanca.
Yeah, Blanca's totally a monster.
And he's amazing. And he always reminded me of, you remember the remake of the Twilight Zone movie?
No one remembers that.
Okay, well, I do. And the segment that's a remake of the William Shatner one, the There's Something on the Wing.
It's
Dan Aykroyd, spoiler alert. Dan Aykroyd says, "Hey, you want to see something scary?" The monster that he turns into, the monster that was on the wing, looks just like Blanca, just like him. It was crazy. When I saw that movie, I was like, "Oh, I know you."
There was such an easy Ghostbusters 3 script joke there that I didn't go for. Hey, you want to see something scary?
No, that's way too close to my heart. Don't do that to me.
I'm sorry.
Moving on. Like, I don't even feel like being here anymore. You just bummed me all out.
All right, well, with that, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we'll finish our discussion about video game monsters. We'll be back. And we're back. We had ourselves a lovely little break, and we're going to continue our discussion about classic video game monsters. And I'm going to kick us off with one of my favorite old school ones. When we first mentioned that we were going to do this topic, when this first came up, the first name that came into my head was the Evil Otto from Berserk. And it's not really a traditional monster. It's not scary like like a giant hideous blood monster scary. It's a bouncing smiley face. It is a relentless...
Yeah, I would agree that there's very little scary about him initially when you first see him.
Yeah, you're first like, hey, look, there's a bouncing smiley face coming my way. That's got to be a power-up. Nope, I'm dead. And then you realize that the Evil Otto is a relentless smiling killing machine that's only purpose in life is to squish and destroy anything that comes in its path.
And it can also freely travel through walls.
Yes, it is an unstoppable killing machine, and it's hilarious.
It is the start of the cheap boss.
It is,
Like,
but it's also the...
You just come right through the goddamn wall. Awesome.
It was the, don't linger in this room too long or the Evil Otto is going to come and kill you. And it was funny that it was this silly-ass smiley face thing, but at the same time, it was one of the earliest examples I can think of the tension that we were talking about last week with things like the SAX in Metroid Fusion, or even the spiders and the ghosts in Haunted House. It seems innocuous until you're actually trying to play the game and you realize this thing can get me. I need to run. Like, there is no defense against it. You have to run because this smiley face is going to friggin' murder you.
And I wonder if he was the precursor or even the inspiration to the monster that I wish to talk about, which is the first time that I was really scared in a video game. Which is kind of sad because it was the second video game I played in my entire whole life. And it was Super Mario Bros. 2. And I'm, of course, talking about the Phantos. Who just look like weird Three Ninjas kind of masks, kabuki masks up on the wall until you grab that key. And then he flashes like a demon and chases you forever and ever and ever and ever.
Yeah, that is a relentless killing machine. That thing is terrifying.
The first time that I grabbed that key... And I was like, oh my god, I gotta get away from this thing. And you get out of that chamber and you're like, yes, I made it. Oh my god, it's back. Why is it still here? It is so awful. It is so awful. It doesn't matter what screen you're on. It doesn't, it's just, you get that key and you run like your little Bohiny is on fire. Because until you clear that stage, that thing is coming after you. And I am not joking. As a child, I had nightmares about that thing. I would have completely innocuous dreams. I was just going about my business, and all of a sudden there's a fleshy demon mask thing, and it's chasing me. And all it has to do is touch you, and you're dead.
Because it's got no eyes. It's just got these soulless black holes, and it's smiling.
Just a hole and a mouth.
It doesn't animate at all.
This podcast has taken an interesting turn. In the last 3 minutes, we've had the word innocuous used twice by two different people, and the phrase "it's just a hole in the mouth" uttered.
Well, we like.
Did you say innocuous or innocuous? Because I was saying innocuous.
Did I say?
I
Did
said
I say
innocuous.
innocuous?
No, you said
You
innocuous,
said innocuous.
because you're not as smart as we are.
That's not true.
Dan's a teacher, ladies and gentlemen.
And here he is giving people injections, apparently, because...
I have been up since 5:45 this goddamn morning.
Okay.
All right?
Moving on. Anyway, really scary, totally just, just a circle that flashes at you. And it's horrifying. And it's not horrifying and like, ooh, it's so gross, and, it doesn't have tentacles and that kind of thing, but it's just so relentless. And every time you think you're safe, because, like, for a half a second, it won't appear in the new room that you're in, and you're like, okay, it's finally gone. Oh god, no, there it is again.
And it swoops
It's
down
terrible.
and with full
It's
speed.
terrible.
But if you put down the key, it floats away.
Yes,
And
but you
that's
need the
thing.
key.
Yeah, you need the key. So you'll put the key down
And you're
and you'll
too
be like, all
panicked.
right, shit, I got to come up with a game plan. So
And
you
you're
pick up the
too
key and you're just like
panicked.
run. But if you go to another
It's
screen,
like, it's
it's
like,
right back there.
yep, it's like when you're water skiing and you fall off your water skis and you're just being dragged behind the boat, and everyone's like, why didn't you just let go? I panicked.
I need that
I
boat.
panicked. Yeah.
How am I supposed to get back to shore without the boat? Jaws will get me.
And then you've got the other fact that it is invincible. It is absolutely
Seriously, there's
unkillable. It's one of the
nothing-
only
there's
things
nothing
in the
that you can
game
do to it.
that can't be killed. You have an invincibility star, it'll just bounce off of you and keep
Yep.
on coming. Like, it
does
won't
not-
stop.
It's like a honey badger. it just keeps coming, and it's just not cool. It's
And
not cool. It's not cool to do that to a child. It
And
was
then
a
like
child.
the Super Mario All Stars version that came out for Super Nintendo, where they bumped them all up to 16-bit. There was this did you guys ever play that one?
No.
All right, so the Phanto rooms are now even more terrifying because it's like, because a lot of those Phanto rooms, there was more than one of them there. There was like
Yeah, there's
three
usually
masks,
three.
and then
Yeah,
the one in the
and then
middle
one
would
of them
wake up.
flashes.
Well,
Yeah,
in the
it flashes
16-bit
and then
version,
chases you.
they have a giant metal statue of a Phanto in the background, just coming out of the wall. And when you pick up the key, the eyes start glowing in the background, and you're just like, oh god! And then the Phanto
That's
wakes up and
terrible.
starts chasing after you. But in that room, whenever you're holding the key, the eyes are making this and glowing red at you, and it's even
That's
more
terrible.
terrifying.
Why would you do that? They're the poor children.
One of these days, we have to have a whole discussion on just how goddamn weird the Super Mario Brothers universe is.
You know,
Because it is a weird place.
it is a pretty strange place.
It is not something you want to think in too much detail about. Their entire hierarchy is mushroom people, except the princess, who appears to be completely human, and her name is Peach Toadstool.
Yeah. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but it really kind of freaks me out. And I really got to question the whole Peach Bowser relationship. Some just doesn't seem right there. I mean, girl's got some serious Stockholm syndrome.
She's into it.
Oh,
Get it.
totally, yeah.
Get a burglar alarm or a padlock or something, woman.
Oh
Come
no,
on.
you
The
captured
Mushroom
me
Kingdom's
again.
military
Oh.
has got to be the most inept
For
military
real.
ever. We can't
I mean,
Yeah,
protect
they're
our
a bunch of
princess for a week.
toadstools.
That's true. They're kind of soft and squidgy.
They're a bunch of toadstools going up against a giant monster.
A
How have
tiny
they never
dragon
been
thing?
conquered before?
Uh,
I mean, Mario
the
hasn't
whole
been around
thing
since
just-
their inception. There's this whole kingdom of what? Just these idiot mushroom people, and nobody bothered to walk over and say, this is a beautiful, fertile land with lots of crops and natural resources. And, these cute
And,
little toad
oh,
people,
look,
they're
A
good.
people that I might enslave.
I mean, you wouldn't even need to enslave them. You just need to walk in and say, I'm in charge now. And they'd be like, okay, sir.
All right,
Yeah.
because you're way bigger than us and like breathe
Well, how
fire
do we
and
know
have
that-
spikes on your back.
How do we know that Peach didn't conquer them initially?
Ooh.
Yeah.
All right, now this is a podcast for another time. I
I
like this line of thinking. But to reel it back in, now we just mentioned, Evil Otto and Phanto, and they're not necessarily traditional monsters per se.
Yeah,
but
not what you would think when somebody goes, a monster. You don't really expect to turn around and see a penny that flashes.
But I think that's what makes them more terrifying in the first place. Is that's the thing that the scariest monsters are sometimes the unexpected ones. I mean, it's like, I guess it's the whole theory behind a clown being scary. A clown is innately supposed to be this non-threatening thing, and it just happens to be the most threatening thing in the face of the planet. Or to even get back to Super Mario Brothers 2, there's that bird mouth door that you go into at the end of every stage.
Yeah,
and then
it looks really scary, and it's not.
It's not until the end of the game where you get the little crystal thing that opens up the bird's mouth, and instead of it just opening its mouth, it detaches from the wall, flies at you, and tries to kill you.
It does, when previously you have been allowing me to use your mouth as a portal.
And
like
now
really
all of a sudden you're
signals.
trying to kill me. So yeah, and I know, Dan, you don't necessarily feel that these things are monsters, but I would argue that that's what makes them the most terrifying monsters. Is they're not the traditional scary, bloody, gory things. They're the things that will actually haunt your nightmares.
Well, and yes, you are correct. I beg to differ insofar as the term monster is being used, because when we started talking about this kicking this idea around for a topic for a podcast, the first thing that popped up into my mind is, for my money, the best monster that has ever been in any video game, and that is the Hydra from the first God of War. When that game came out, it changed the perception of games. I mean, I really think it did. It took action games to an entirely new level. And as you're going on this ship, it's the very first level in the very first game, and you're walking through this ship, and you got to get this key from this dude to unlock a door on the ship, and he runs away, and as he's running, a Hydra, a 3-headed Hydra, pops out of the water and eats this dude. And now you have to fight this Hydra, and you start off by fighting the first 2 little heads, and it's an interesting little fight. They have some cool attacks, and you defeat the 2 Hydra heads by knocking their health down to, a low enough point where they kind of flop down on the deck of their ship, and you jump up on these crates and drop a giant spike through their head. And then once you kill the first 2...
No, they're not dead. You have to trap them, because if you
trap
you just kill them, then they turn into more heads, and that's not okay.
So you climb up the rigging to the top of the ship, up to the mast, and there is a giant Hydra head screaming at you with a roar that I say is on par with the roar from the T-Rex in Jurassic Park as a very iconic, terrifying, monstrous noise. It just screams at you and throws its head at you and tries to bite you. And the thing that was so cool about this entire sequence to me was that you're playing this game, and for the first time, at least that I can remember, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but you had a real cinematic feel to it because you had QuickTime events. So you would fight the Hydra, and you would be knocking its head around and using your magic that you got earlier on in the game, and the head would flop down, and the circle icon would appear up on the screen, and when you hit the circle, you would throw your chains, God damn it, what are they called?
Your shorty chain swords.
Yeah, your shorty chain swords. No, they have a name, and now I can't remember what the goddamn name is.
Chain blades? Or
something like that. God,
I can't remember what they are either. But
use
you know
the
what?
fact god and come in and correct us. But you would throw your chain blades at him and bash his head into the mast so that you would break the mast and end the fight eventually. After you do it 3 times, you would then get into this really impressive cinematic of Kratos flipping around and swinging up on top of this monster's head and eventually driving the broken mast of the ship through the eyeball and through the head of this Hydra and all the way down, and it would die, and the other 2 heads exploded, and then you had to go into its body to get the guy that it ate who has the key, and he's just kind of hanging down there by his uvula, and you pick him up, and he's like, oh, thank the gods for saving me. And Kratos, being the ultimate badass that he is, takes the key and then drops the guy down into this dead Hydra's gullet. It's amazing.
They're the Blades of Chaos, by the way.
The Blades of
Chaos.
Thank you.
There you go. Now, to take it a step back further, this isn't the first instance of QuickTime events, but I think you're absolutely right in saying that this is the first time that anybody has ever made it this level of a cinematic experience. And taking it back to before the game's release, to the demo, which was earth-shattering, because we've played action games before, but nothing on this level of the way the camera moved around and was so engrossing, and fighting those Hydra heads throughout the ship and doing all the little things that you did. And I remember, starting up the game and thinking, wow, the graphics are really impressive. Loving the camera angles, the way the ship's moving. And I pressed circle twice, and I picked up a dude, and I ripped him in half. And I was like, I can do that all day. Just pick him up, rip him in half. I can do that all day. But that roar that you were talking about was the end of the demo. Like, when you finally got to that last head, you didn't get to fight that. That was where the demo ended, and that sold me. There was no one I showed that demo to that would play that and then get to the end and say, well, no, I don't give a shit what happens next. So, no, you do. You care what happens next.
Yeah, it really is. Like, God of War is one of those games that you can look at, and I think that first boss battle, and that to me, like, when I was thinking about video game monsters, it's not just, for me, the look of the monster, but it's the interaction with the monster itself.
And
that
the
one
scope.
is,
I mean,
it's so huge, and it, like, really, that game is a hallmark. It fundamentally changed the way the games were done. You played that and went, this is something new, this is different, and this is amazing, and I need more of this going forward.
Now, while I totally agree with you on that the scope was unbelievable, I think something that did it before and did it in a kind of a different way is my favorite video game monster, and that was Kraid in Super Metroid. Now, Kraid in the original game, the original Metroid, and I've spoken about the way I played the Metroid games when I was a kid. I played the first one, then I played the second one when it came out, and Super Metroid was the third one. And the way Super Metroid played specifically with people who had played previous Metroid games before was so genius. It still blows my mind to this day. Now, Kraid in the original Metroid was a difficult boss, as Ridley and Kraid were both difficult bosses to fight back then. But he was this little creature. Well, not really little. He was slightly taller than Samus. And he was this big fat thing, and he would shoot all these little missiles and claws out and stuff. And it was a neat fight, and you beat him, and it was fairly intense, and you moved on. Super Metroid comes around, and you're back on... you now haven't seen Kraid all through the second game. You're back on the original planet of Zebes from the first Metroid game, and you're traveling through Kraid's lair, and you're getting to this point that looks just like the room you fought Kraid in the original Metroid. So now we're in this place that's got these little claws sticking from the ceiling and a couple of red dots and this metal paneling, and it looks just like you're ready to fight Kraid, and you walk through this hallway. The music is different than any other room in the game, and you get to this point where Kraid shows up, and he is within scale to Samus and doing the things that Kraid does, and I'm like, shit, it's Kraid! I'm gonna shoot the shit out of him. So I'm blowing out super missiles, and I'm just blowing him up, and then all of a sudden he's dead, and I'm like, oh, that was rather anticlimactic. Oh, well, I guess I've just got more power-ups than I should have gotten by this point. Or maybe I'm just really good at this game. Good for me. So I blow up this little Kraid, I collect the power-ups, and I move on to the next room, because I'm thinking, well, I just beat the mini-boss, so I'm going to get an item. And you go into this room, and the door locks behind you, and there's nowhere to go. As far as you can see, to the edge of the screen, there's spikes on the floor, there's no platforms floating up in the sky, there's nowhere that you can go, and the door's locked behind you.
Never a good sign.
Never a good sign. No idea what to expect. I'm like, all right, how am I going to get out of this room? And then the whole thing starts shaking, and then the real Kraid comes out of the ground, who has to be at least 20 times larger than you are. And he comes halfway out of the ground, up to like the bottom of his upper torso, and he is mammoth. And he lets out this horrible scream, and I'm just like, oh my god, what the fuck do I do now? I'm shooting everything I can at it, and he's like charging at me and stuff, but he's only halfway out. And then I shoot him in the face once, and he says, I'm not having this, and then he gets all the way out, and now the character is way too big to even fit on the screen. So all I can see is his feet marching around on these spikes, and I have to jump up on these little platforms to get up to that have shown up since he showed up, like he busted some crap out of the wall or something, and I have to climb up so that I can shoot him in his weak spot in his face. And The first time I fought him, I was terrified because there's this gigantic, fat, green monster that's shooting these nail tendril things out of his stomach and claws flying through the sky and just screaming at me. And I'm just like, this thing is so crazy big, and I don't feel like I'm doing him any damage. And I'm just pumping everything I have into him. And because it was so frantic, he almost killed me the first time I got to him. Now, looking at it now, he's actually ridiculously easy to beat. I can beat him in no time flat now. He's pretty freaking weak.
Yeah,
but
I just jump up here and shoot you in the face a bunch.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like chainsaw hands. Shotgun to the face, pretty damn effective.
Yeah, but I mean, at first glance, that's pretty intimidating.
It was insanely intimidating, and that was what made him such a terrifying and amazing boss battle, was because the first time you get to him, you're just like, I've never seen anything this big before. How am I supposed to fight this thing? It is so tremendous. And I felt like just $1 billion when I finally did beat him. And it was just an amazing experience. But similar to the way the Hydra, that scale, I don't think that anything had come close to Kraid. Nothing came close to Kraid before that. And I don't think anything came close to that experience of seeing Kraid until the Hydra. Until God of War. And God of War eventually...
They are very similar.
Yeah, and God of War plays with scale incredibly well. Like, that series really took playing with scale to the next level, because you were this, human-sized character, but you were insanely powerful. And that, because of the way they played off of your knowledge of what you thought you knew Kraid was at the original Metroid, and then throwing that fake Kraid at you in the beginning... and then having the real thing show up and just be so much bigger than you could have possibly imagined. Like, that was just such an amazing experience. And really, Kraid is such a cool, nasty monster design. And I want to see Kraid come back in some capacity in a future Metroid game.
Now, see, I think the best video game monster that there ever has been, I think goes completely in the opposite direction that you guys are going. It's subtle. It's not big, there's no tentacles, it's not scary, it's not slimy, it's nothing. It almost exists kind of entirely in your head, and that's GLaDOS. I think she is quite possibly the most terrifying, horrifying monster that there ever has been in a video game, and there's nothing even to her but a little red dot once you finally get to see her. But she tears you down more relentlessly than any manner of slimy teeth chainsaws that anything else could possibly throw at you. Just when you think you're doing really well, and I'm really thinking with portals now, she comes on and tells you you're fat. and I don't see how you can top that in terms of monster.
If she had chainsaw hands, though.
Yeah, true.
She could have chainsaw hands if she wants to, and that I think is part of her diabolicalness, which is a word that I've just made up.
But she's more of a villain than a monster. See, the difference when you're looking at something like Phanto or Evil Otto, it's just it's a mindless killing machine. But GLaDOS is a straight up villain. GLaDOS is like Scar from The Lion King. She is a smart villain. She is your intellectual superior as much as she is a physical danger. And monsters, a lot of the times, at least when I think of monsters, are just, they're the things that are just there to kill you. And GLaDOS wasn't necessarily just there to kill you. She wanted to experiment on you. She wanted to learn things. And now she was obviously she's a different kind of monster. She was monstrous. She displayed monstrous personality and evil. But I don't know that I would call her a monster.
See, I disagree, because I feel the traditional monster, in some way, it's kind of like the Godzilla movies. After a certain amount of time, you kind of turn on it, and Godzilla becomes your friend. Because at some point, you got to kind of, they're working with a very basic hypothalamus type situation going. They have a fight or flight, prey-predator kind of mentality happening, and you can't really blame them, because they're really designed only to eat your face. That's all, they're just being the way God made them to be, and that's not their fault. But GLaDOS does it on purpose. And just knowing that she could have chainsaw hands, and she could have chainsaw hands, and she knows that that she could have chainsaw hands, but she doesn't. Like, just knowing is enough. That's terrible.
I think what makes her a monster ultimately is the fact that she calls you a monster. It's like, look,
Yeah.
if you're going to call me a monster, you must obviously be a monster. And I don't know, that, like, when you get to see Gladys and she is kind of almost snake-like in her movement.
the way the arm whips around. Spoiler alert for those of you who haven't played through the first Portal. First of all, you have no business listening to a video game podcast if you haven't played through at least the first Portal. But second of all, the way that her arm mechanism kind of snakes around like that, and almost the way, especially in the final fight scene of both of them, the way that the room can be used, it's almost like you're within her, like she's a monster that you're inside of, because the panels on the wall then act as tentacles and arms and all kinds of craziness, and it's definitely a monster for I hesitate to say the new millennia. Like it's a monster more in the direction that we're going, because in today's age of biological warfare, anything that's slimy, I kind of know how to kill you, and from relatively far away. I have any manner of chemicals that's going to be very bad for you. But
you know what? You've convinced me with that, because when I think about she is the room and she is all of that, you're just thinking of those final battles with Gladys or Wheatley.
Spoilers.
God, I love Wheatley so much.
I don't know that I've ever felt more betrayed than Wheatley.
It's really hard when that elevator stops and he goes, "Wait a minute." It's like, "No! What are you doing?" It's so sad. Oh, it's so sad.
That is a whole other podcast.
It really is.
We will have a Portal podcast.
Oh,
I think,
good
like,
Lord.
The coolest thing about Gladys to me is I think she plays off of, and I would have to imagine it was 100% intentional. She plays off of one of the greatest, for my money, movie monsters that there has ever been, and that's Hal.
Hal has
Hal has nothing.
Wishes he could be
no,
Gladys.
Of course. Like, comparatively speaking, Hal has nothing on Gladys, but Hal from 2001 is one of the most heartbreakingly effective monsters that there has ever been. Of like, Hal, open the pod bay doors. I'm sorry, David, I can't do that. Just this very cold. It is illogical for you to live, so I'm not gonna let it happen. It's just so terrifying and evil, and then you have Gladys, who now calls you fat while she's trying to kill you.
I would disagree with that, because monstrous. Hal was still very cold and very calculating and very, you're human and you're fallible, therefore you endanger the mission. There's really nothing personal here. This is just the way it has to be. I find Gladys so terrifying because she is a cold, calculating robot that thinks it's fun to do this to you.
Yeah.
Like, a robot that can have fun at your expense is quite possibly the most terrifying thing in the whole wide world.
It is certainly not a world I want to live in.
No.
It's Ultron, but funny.
Yeah, it's a funny Ultron. And that is terrifying. That is
really
a monster.
is terrifying. Oh, jeez. All right, well, I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up for us. I mean, God, there's so many monsters that we could still talk about. I mean, I was actually going to bring up the cockatrice from Super Ghouls and Ghosts, because Super Ghouls and Ghosts is another game with great monster designs, and there's lots of great moments in there. But we could spend all night talking about monsters, but maybe we'll just have to do that next year, because
well, hell, we didn't even talk about War of the Monsters or King of the Monsters
or Rampage. So many monsters.
So many great monsters to talk about. All right, real quick before we go, I would like to plug that I have renewed my vow to work on Pokemon, and Pokemon Propitiation, which is this article series I've been intending to write about me finally playing Pokemon after all these years. I just wrote another article last night. It was another journal entry that was talking about the fact that I've barely had time to touch the game. So that can be found at our website, geeklife.com. Just look in the Think Tank section, and you should be seeing more updates from Pokemon Propitiation incoming. And Tiff, why don't you take us home with the rest of it?
Okay, well, if you like what you hear, you can always find this show and the rest of our shows at geeklife.com, G33KLIFE. You can always drop us a line at geeklifesite@gmail.com. And make sure you like, rate, and subscribe. That gets our podcast out to more listeners, and we can have more shows for you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That was very concise and to the point, and damn did I appreciate it. All right, everybody, thanks again for listening, and we'll be back next week with another fresh, fancy new episode for you, hopefully including Dean. Have a great night.
Happy Halloween.
Before we get any further, did you make a Salute Your Shorts reference earlier?
Oh, yes, I did. I did, and I am standing by it. Because every arcade had a Bobby Budnick. And I will stand by it to the point that fast forward several years into the future when, and I said future, that's funny, Terminator 2 comes out, we spy our young hooligan,
he was John Connor's
Connor
friend helping him
in the
rip off an
arcade
ATM.
with Bobby Budnick, stealing all the machines.
That's
so
great.
see, every arcade had some mullet-headed, red-headed stepchild with a jean vest on that was just ruining everybody's day. And that kid should have warned me about the glowy-eyed skull floaty Sinistar nightmare, because that thing was terrible.